Hello and welcome to Redwood Wonk. My name is Eric Kirk. I'm joined by Chuck Rogers, and for the next hour, we're going to take a deep dive into the politics of the week. And I did read that, not from a teleprompter. But anyway, we've got so much to talk about tonight. Of course, we are talking on the Wednesday before the debate. The debate is to be next Thursday night, so you will be hearing this or watching this on Access Humboldt on at some point the day after the debate. We'll see how that's going to go. We're going to talk a little bit about what to expect at the debate tonight, but something happened last Friday that is, really earth-shattering in terms of politics and in terms of our legal justice system. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, in my view, possibly the best justice we have had in the history of the country, and that's saying something because we've had some real giants. But just her depth, her compassion, and her sense of justice. It's just we're going to miss it. We're going to feel it right away, not just in terms of the politics, but just in terms of what she brought to the court. I mean, everybody respected her. They've been working on a documentary for her for a couple of years now, and they couldn't find even very many conservatives who knew her to say bad things about her. The only people who could say bad things about her are people who've never met her or have never really dealt with her. And she was good friends with Justice Scalia, possibly had a great impact on him. When I was in law school, my criminal procedure professor said that Scalia has never met a car search he didn't like. He met quite a few later in his career, and I think that's due to her influence. They were really good friends, so she's basically saved the Fourth Amendment that way. I really wish the media would stop saying something, because I'm hearing it over and over again that liberals are too used to having a majority on the Supreme Court. Liberals have not had a majority in the Supreme Court since the 70s. Reagan came into office. He had appointed three justices, and it's been 5-4 ever since. It almost became 6-3 at one point, except that Justice Souter surprised everybody and turned out to be somebody totally different than everybody expected. But ever since then, liberals have not had a majority. We've had a few swing voters. Kennedy went a few ways, with the liberal minority, and Justice Roberts has done it a few times. But of course, at this point, it's going to be 6-3, and even if Roberts joins the Liberals, it's still 5-4, and that of course is going to have an enormous impact, possibly as early as this election. We've got a clip from her about the importance of dissent. Of course, her whole career has been mostly dissents because she has been in the liberal minority for the entirety of her Supreme Court career. But we've got a clip in which I want to talk about the importance of that of dissent and what it means. But before we start that clip, and it's a little over 7 minutes long, Chuck, what would you like to add?
Well, just to follow up on what you were just saying there, I hope I'm right about this, but I think it's 15 of the last 19 justices have been nominated by a Republican president. It's something, I believe it's 15 of the last 19. So just to put a fine point on your assertion there that we're not used to having majorities, that's very true, and that's a good point. The other thing I would like to say before you hear this clip, and it's quite good, I hope people do listen to it, is that Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a giant in the law even before she was appointed to the court. The work she did in the 1970s and 80s leading up to her appointment was groundbreaking. And not only that, but after she left law school, she found it difficult to even be hired, even to get a job.
Yes.
That's so think of how far she came from that to being, as you say, one of the great justices of all time.
All right, let's take a look at this clip.
You became quite famous for your dissents. There's been a long period of time where you're the most senior of the more for more liberal members of the court. There was a time, I think about 10 or 11 years ago, when Linda Greenhouse of the New York Times wrote an article on the front page of the New York Times where she said that that term will be remembered as when you found your voice. And I think it was probably either the Ledbetter case or maybe the VMI case. But explain, and a bench dissent is when a justice of the Supreme Court actually reads from the dissent, when the court is announcing its decision.
A summary.
From some of it. When you do that, who is your audience? Obviously, the majority already disagreed with you. Are you speaking to the future? Are you speaking to Congress? Are you assuming that, like the great dissents of Justices Holmes and Brandeis, that the day will come when your dissent will be the law of the land? What leads you to want to read a dissent like that?
I will announce a dissent from the bench if I think that the court not only got it wrong, but egregiously wrong. And sometimes those dissents are addressed to Congress, as was true in the Lilly Ledbetter case. The bottom line of my dissent in that case was the ball is now in Congress's court to correct the error into which the court has fallen. And in very short order, Congress, with overwhelming majorities, amended Title VII so that it said with unmistakable clarity what I thought it meant all along. It reminded me of an earlier incident when the Supreme Court in the 70s said discrimination on the basis of pregnancy is not discrimination on the basis of sex. Again, there was a coalition, and by a large majority, Congress passed the Pregnancy Discrimination Act, which is the soul of simplicity. It simply says, discrimination on the basis of pregnancy is discrimination on the basis of sex. And in Lilly Ledbetter's case, well, every woman of a certain age knows what she experienced. That is, she was an area manager at a Goodrich tire plant. She, when she was hired, was the only woman area manager. One day, when she'd been working there over a dozen years, someone put a slip of paper in her mailbox. It had a series of numbers. The numbers were the salaries of all of the area managers. And Lilly could see that the young man she had recently trained was earning more money than she was. So she said, enough, I'm going to sue. She got a substantial jury verdict, and then when her case came to the court, they said she sued too late. Title VII says you must complain within 180 days of the discriminatory incident. Lilly Ledbetter is way out of time. She waited years to sue. My theory was that every time she got a paycheck, the paycheck incorporated the discrimination, so she could sue 180 days from any paycheck. I also pointed out that what would have happened had Lilly Ledbetter sued early on. No doubt the defense would have been, it has nothing to do with Lilly being a woman. She just doesn't do the job as well. But then she works there year after year and she gets good performance ratings. That defense is no longer available. They can't say she doesn't do the job as well as the men when they rated her as high or higher than the men. So now she has a winning case. But the court said she waited too long. So that kind of dissent, if the court is interpreting a statute like Title VII, then Congress can fix it. But when the court is making a ruling on a constitutional matter, Congress can't fix it. Only an amendment to the Constitution, and we have a Constitution that's powerfully hard to amend, or the court has to change its mind. But there has been a tradition in the United States of dissents becoming the law of the land. And we can go back to the worst decision the Supreme Court ever made. It was in the Dred Scott case. There was a fine dissent by Justice Curtis in that case. Or the first Justice, John Marshall Harlan, who dissented in the so-called civil rights cases in 1886 and in Plessy against Ferguson. Or you mentioned Holmes and Brandeis around the time of World War I. Those free speech cases today are all the law of the land. So you're writing for a future age, and your hope is that with time, the court will see it the way you do.
All right. I mean, a remarkable woman, articulate to the end. She talks very slowly and deliberately, but we're talking about somebody who was raised in the context, pardon me, not raised, but went to law school in the context of where there was really no protection for women against discrimination. Hard for her to find a job. Civil Rights Acts hadn't passed. Firms were openly saying, we want men only. And she had to find employment in that context. She did. And it began a long, brilliant career.
And I do think that her dissents will, at some point in the future, and we don't know when it will be, but at some point in the future, the things that she outlines in so many of her dissents will become law. The reason she is a dissenter, or was a dissenter recently and through most of her time on the court, is that for a while now we have been not in a time of reason, but in a time of passion. And Ginsburg was a person of reason and common sense, and we're not there right now. So that's why a lot of her thoughts become dissent at a point like this. But at some time, what she has had to say in her very important dissents will become law.
All right. Well, why don't we move on from that point, because we are now dealing with the fact that she unfortunately passed away just before Rosh Hashanah, by the way. A rabbi once said that God decides who's going to die in the following year, but saves the best until the end of the year. And she literally died hours before the new year. So the idea being that God wants them to live as long as they can after he's made that decision. So, and of course she was Jewish, and they are honoring her in that tradition right now. So with that, of course, that leaves a vacancy on the court. And of course, the Republicans, remembering 4 years ago when, Scalia died in February, and they determined that no way should anybody be elected in a Supreme Court justice be appointed in an election year. They're sticking to their principles, and they're going to honor what they said 4 years ago, right, Chuck?
Wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's
yeah, and we should not be surprised. Hypocrisy in all caps, and this is important because I have said before on this program that I think this election will be on its way to the Supreme Court. And that's part of the rush here is and Trump has said this out loud, so, we all know that he wants a 6-3 court so that no matter what happens with the election results, they will have some route to keep him in office. And that's, in fact, he said that today, and it's been reported today, and there will be more reporting on it in the Atlantic soon. So, in fact, his team now has a group or a committee within the campaign that's working on contingency plans as a way of keeping him in office. And one of the things they're talking about now, according to some of the reporting I've been reading, including the Atlantic, is that they want to take a look at a lot of states, especially swing states, that have state legislative bodies that are controlled by Republicans. In those states, they'll contest the election should Trump lose the election in that state. Invalidate it, and at that point the state legislature picks the electors who will then go to the electoral college, and so they'll get around the popular results that way. And they plan to do that in multiple states if need be. So I think that we are heading toward the Supreme Court, just as it did in the year 2000, installing the person they want in office, and it's going to be Donald Trump.
Well, it can only happen if it's close enough for that to happen. In other words, it's really got to come down to one state, and it's got to be a close vote. I think what this says is Biden's got to win this thing by 6 or 7 points nationally and convincingly in the swing states. He's got to maintain the poll differences he's got now. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But
I hope that you're right. Mm-hmm. I think once again, when we are at a time where we lack reason and we are bending to passion from the far right, that I'm not sure it matters what the margin is anymore. I think that this is a person who Trump, I'm talking about, emotionally and politically and practically cannot accept defeat. So no matter the margin, he's not leaving.
Right.
And he has enough people helping him. He now has the Department of Justice and the Attorney General. And before the election, he's going to have a 6-3 margin on the Supreme Court. And justices on the court who are as passionate about far right politics as he is. So I hope that you're right and I'm wrong.
I really think that unless it's really clear cut that neither Roberts nor, for that matter, Alito will go along with them. I do think Alito is one of them. The rest of them, they'll go. Whoever he's going to point now is obviously going to be somebody who they have a conversation with, and I wouldn't trust that person, at all. Kavanaugh, who blamed Clinton for his troubles during the hearing, is out there. Thomas. And Thomas will just go along with it as he always has. So I agree, but I don't think that Roberts and Alito want that to be their legacy, unless there's some kind of real clear-cut law that they can point to, which does that. So we'll see. Roberts they can't count on, and if Roberts even dissents, it undermines the whole thing, even if Alito doesn't go along with him. Maybe I'm too hopeful for that. But I'm
glad to know somebody is optimistic about this. So, I have to confess that I'm at the point now where I'm a little worried about this. I can see if the shenanigans get even worse than they already are, I can see blue states deciding not to accept Trump's end run around the election results. And I don't know where we would be at that point. But I think that the time between November the 3rd and January 20th, which I believe is Inauguration Day, I think could be not quiet, in fact, very loud.
All right. Well, let's pretend for the rest of the show like the election is going to matter. We'll talk about that because we've got. I do think that this is going to affect the Senate races, And I do think that this actually, I am going against the media, what the media is putting out there, because the media, a lot of the pundits are saying, well, this is going to bring some conservatives back into the fold because they really want a conservative court, so they're going to vote for Trump and vote for Lindsey Graham. But see, if it happens before the election, those conservatives can have it both ways. They can have their conservative majority, and it's not going to matter after that because that's they'll have that, so they don't need to vote it. So if they're inclined to vote other than Trump because of that, it's not going to have any effect. I also point out that since Justice Ginsburg passed away, that the Democrats broke records for fundraising over the weekend.
Right.
I mean, there is a lot of enthusiasm around it. Again, the media keeps saying, well, they're so used to having the majority. They haven't had the majority since the Warren Court, really. I mean, even the Berger Court was more conservative. So I am kind of optimistic there, and I am optimistic that I think that, well, McSally was probably going to lose anyways. And the interesting thing is if they don't get the election done by November 3rd and Arizona certifies its votes within a couple of weeks, that Kelly will become senator in that moment. He doesn't have to wait till January. It's a special election. So so that would bring it down from 52 to 48 and pardon me, 49. I forget what it is, but it would mean that they would that all of a sudden any dissent from the Republicans from moderates would do it. And the question is what would happen with Susan Collins. I think Susan Collins is going to lose. I don't think this stand is going to help her because I think the Democrats in Maine are energized against her and do not want, because of her vote on Kavanaugh and impeachment, don't want her in there. And I don't think she's got a lot of respect for the Republicans. I don't think that the Trumpers are going to turn out for her in complete numbers. So I think she's gone. I think that Tillis' stand is going to really hurt him. I think that it may even hurt Daines to some degree, because I do think that there are voters out there, conservative voters, who think person's word should mean something, and that takes us to South Carolina. Lindsey Graham said 4 years ago famously, "Use my words against me." And it's not just that he was a lame duck, because he said in there, I wanted at least a lame dunk, but I wanted to apply even after the first 4-year term. Use the words against me and you'll be right. And right now the Lincoln Project is plastering South Carolina with his ads saying that. And there's got to be some Republicans who are going to say, yeah, he said that. Why is he not living up to that? It made sense. And we're talking about somebody who was nominated in February as opposed to almost October, in which they were saying that. And so, it's I think the hypocrisy is going to hurt him. I think it could cost, assuming the elections are fair, the Republicans the Senate by a few votes. I think it's going to have. I think it pretty much gives. Corey has blown it against Hickenlooper, and I still think it's a long shot. But McGrath now has her wedge issue against in Kentucky. So
against McConnell.
Against McConnell. So
and Jamie Harrison in South Carolina had a fundraising haul after all this happened. So the last poll I saw in South Carolina was that's still a dead heat. So we'll see. The constituency I'm a little worried about right now, and it has to do with what's going on with the shakeup at the Supreme Court, are the Republicans who know what Donald Trump is all about. They despise him. They think he's disgusting and doesn't represent most of what they believe in or what they think about the difference between right and wrong. But they vote for him because of the culture wars that get decided at the Supreme Court. And the fact that the Supreme Court now has become an issue again, front and center, front of mind is what worries me about that group. Some of those, I think, had become really tired of Donald Trump and the whole shtick about Donald Trump. And I think that some of those folks were the ones who were leaning toward making an unusual vote for a Democrat in this cycle because they were tired of Donald Trump and they had become embarrassed about themselves for having voted for this guy. But once Justice Ginsburg died and the Supreme Court became top of mind again, I'm worried that a few of those may not decide to vote for Biden again and think, you know what, my decision to vote for this guy because of the Supreme Court was right. I'm going to do it again. Those are the ones I'm worried about right now because of all the publicity about the Supreme Court right now.
That's what a lot of the pundits are saying. I don't see the logic to that because they're going to have their Supreme Court. They'll have it before the election. So they don't need to vote for Trump for the Supreme Court. They're going to have their 6-3 majority regardless.
Yeah, I understand that. And that's a good point. But here's what I think they're thinking about. Folks who think that much about their vote also know that the Republican Party is swimming against the demographics. And the future is not good for them. Mm-hmm. They are a dying party. And I don't know that 6-3 makes them comfortable for the future as they see it, the view of the future from their point of view for their children and grandchildren and their grandchildren. So I think that if they see an opportunity to maybe get to 7-2, or not only that, but now that the idea has been proposed about expanding the court, why not leave Trump in office for another 4 years and do exactly that? Expand the court and appoint 3 more ultra-conservative judges and make it 9-2, 9-3 at that point. So I'm really, really concerned about that. And I don't know how many of the moderate Republicans and how many of the lean right independents we can count on at this point. I still have my fingers crossed, and I still think that there's enough momentum out there against Trump, not for Biden, but against Trump, that Biden can win this. But I'm much more concerned since last weekend than I have been.
All right. Well, like I said, we'll see where the polls go. It's too early to know what kind of impact, if any, that Ginsburg's death is going to have on the movement. We'll find out. There is a poll that came out that's a little concerning. It's an outlier, but it's an A+ rating poll according to 538. And today, ABC Washington Post gave Trump a 4-point lead in Florida and a 1-point lead in Arizona. It's an outlier, however. 3 other polls came out in Florida. 1 has them tied, 2 has them Biden with a 3-point lead. I really doubt that Trump has a 4-point lead in Florida. And I really doubt he has any kind of lead in Arizona. Other polls do it. It's an outlier, but it's an A+ rated poll. However, the people themselves who released the poll said, be careful with this. There is a lot out there, and apparently it was a little Republican heavy in the sampling. Yeah. So we'll see. But that is a little bit of a concern.
On those polls in Florida and Arizona, what that all tells me, if there's any question on the part of the Biden campaign about Florida and Arizona, and there should be, the fact that we are moving forward with this Supreme Court appointment with someone who likely would vote to invalidate Obamacare and help the Republicans try to destroy Medicare and Medicaid, both of those states, Florida and Arizona, include populations, large populations that are 65 plus, people who depend on the Affordable Care Act and Medicare and Medicaid. And so it seems to me that what the Biden campaign should be doing right now, especially in Florida and Arizona, but other places as well, is really focus on the hazard that the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, and Medicare and Social Security, for that matter, face were Trump to be in office for 4 more years.
Right. Well, we have a few things happening, and there's always again the suppression
Yeah.
of the vote. North Carolina, the number of early votes, they're doing early voting right now. The number of ballots that have been rejected for one reason or another are 4-to-1 black to white in terms of proportion. And we know this in North Carolina because as a vestige of the Voting Rights Act, they still have they still track it. They still ask you for your racial identification when you register to vote, and it's all open to the public. And it's the state's own numbers says we have rejected 4-to-1. It's still early, plenty of time to correct the mistakes, but it suggests to me that they're scrutinizing votes, ballots out of those areas more than they're scrutinizing the others. So that's that's one thing. And then in Pennsylvania, there's a controversy and a lawsuit over what they're calling the ballot thing. And the Philadelphia Inquirer wrote that they're concerned that this could actually, the naked ballot could be the hanging chad that defeats Biden this year round. And basically what it means is when you do mail-in, you have to put your ballot inside an envelope that goes inside another envelope to keep it secret against the person opening the envelope initially. And why you have to do that? You don't have to do that in California, most other states, but there are already questions about what kind of impact it's going to have. Now, is that necessarily going to impact Democrats any more than Republicans? Who knows? But it is going to lower the votes if it goes in at the last minute. Any of them. But they're getting word out. Democrats are organized, getting word out. Do not, send your ballots in naked, and that gets people's attention.
Absolutely. Let me ask you this. One of the things we know is that the Supreme Court docket coming up in November, they're going to hear arguments about the ACA, I believe, on November the 10th. It's likely that a case, given what will be the new makeup of the court, involving Roe versus Wade will arrive there at some point in the near future, very soon, to be decided on. Do you think that, especially with Roe versus Wade, the Biden campaign can energize female vote even more than it already was?
I think so. I think also he gave a great speech the other day about healthcare and saying this is going to take healthcare away for millions of people in the middle of a pandemic. And he's got to keep mentioning the pandemic because Trump wants people to forget about the pandemic at this point. It's going to be a little hard because it looks like we're on the uptick in terms of cases again going up. I don't know if it's because of the winter or because people are getting lax, school returning, but we were going down there, and then about 2 weeks ago it started going up again, and deaths are still between 900 and 1,000 a day. Trump has to keep that out of the news somehow, and we just passed 200,000, and I don't know. I haven't watched a lot of mainstream media coverage, but feels like it was almost on page 7. Like we've become so numb to it. It has now become the third largest cause of death in the country after heart disease and cancer. And it's not a part of the discussion. Biden has to bring that into the discussion.
Yeah. I think a few minutes ago you were mentioning the Senate. There's another special election in Georgia. For right now, it features 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat. It's likely that nobody's going to get 50%. So there may be 1 Republican and 1 Democrat after this is all over still to go into a finale that would happen the first week of January, I believe it is. So there's another chance for a Democratic pickup in Georgia, maybe even 2 in Georgia. And so what I'm getting at is that in the best case scenario, if Biden wins and the Democrats retake the Senate, are you pro or con as quickly as possible granting statehood to the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico, possibly the U.S. Virgin Islands, trying to get 6 more Democrats? And I know that would not be easy, but with a majority in the Senate and still holding the House. It's possible. And maybe also expanding the number of justices on the lower court, which over the last 20 years have been a focus of the Republican Party, especially during the Trump years. Where do you stand on all that?
I've supported D.C. statehood for years. I support Puerto Rican statehood if the Puerto Rican majority of voters wants it. It has passed the last couple of referendums. I support that regardless of the politics. And I know that it's been opposed because Republicans know that it would mean, for each one, it would mean 2 senators and House representatives as well. If we're going to have a country, be our colony, they should have the right to statehood if they want. That should be in our Constitution, honestly, that if, we either let them go or make them a state, and it should be their choice. And right now, for the first time about 6 years ago, Puerto Rico actually had a fairly clear majority supporting statehood if that's what they want, which they should have it. D.C. absolutely should have been a state years ago. We have what's called taxation without representation. That's supposed to be tyranny. And I absolutely, I would support that even if it meant 2 new Republican senators. But as far as expanding the courts, we do need to expand the lower courts. I would caution against expanding the Supreme Court. I know some people are proposing that. It didn't go well for Roosevelt in 1936 when he tried to do it. And I'm concerned about the precedent. We could end up with, 30 justices, if the Republicans take over again, so it's just so I would caution against that. But definitely we need more judges on the lower courts where they're overloaded.
I think the lower courts have not been expanded since the 1970s, if I'm not mistaken, early 1970s. And your view there about the Supreme Court is in line with Ginsburg's view. She was asked fairly recently about this as well, and her view is that no, that would just start a ping pong match. When the Republicans are in, they add 3. When the Democrats are in, they add 3. And pretty much you end up at some point with 50 justices and nothing gets done. So, I agree with you there. I think it's a travesty that D.C. has not had statehood a long, long time ago. That goes against everything that supposedly we stand for. So, but the Republicans have been opposed to that fervently every single time, and which is once again why elections matter. It's all coming to the fore right now about why it's important for people to register to vote and then actually vote. It does have consequences.
All right, why don't we talk a little bit, getting back to the presidential, we have a debate coming up on Tuesday. I just read an article this morning from Politico that entitled Trump Falls into His Own Trap for Biden. He's been calling Biden Sleepy Joe. I know that his advisors have tried to get him off it during the RNC. He never said it because it's kind of backfiring right now, because a lot of people, particularly in that center, would really like somebody who isn't tweeting and acting crazy, and being measured. And it does, convey that. Well, they've lowered expectations for Biden. They're expecting him to exhibit clear dementia in the debates, and they've already got their line. Well, he must be taking meds to do it. But really, I think they've made a mistake. And according to the Politico article, his people are in panic because yesterday, after Cindy McCain endorsed him, he said, "Well, she can have Sleepy Joe." After Cindy McCain endorsed Biden, and brought it right out again. And so their backup plan is to basically, they're preparing to attack the media for declaring Biden a winner of the debate. That's what they're gearing up for. But this is going to be pretty huge because a lot of people a lot of Republicans are kind of banking on the idea that he's suffering from dementia, and quite frankly, he's not. He's a little bit, a step or two slower in terms of how he delivers his thought, but he's a stutterer. He's always had that issue, and I really think that can potentially backfire against him unless Biden does show some kind of signs of dementia. I don't see how he quote unquote loses the debate, and by that I mean how it's interpreted by voters and polls afterwards.
Yeah. I agree. What I've been reading and hearing as well, in fact, I believe I heard this last night on the BBC, one of their reporters talking about the fact that Trump is really not preparing for this. Generally, before a presidential debate, weeks and months ahead of time, you have somebody there who is well studied on what the opponent's views are, and that person plays that role, and there is practice on the debates every single day for hours leading up to it, because it's so crucial, especially for the incumbent, because the debates are a lot about the incumbent, and the whole election is a lot about a referendum on the incumbent and how that person has done so far. But Trump is not doing any of that, which tells me that he's going to treat these debates as another rally. And it really doesn't matter what is asked or even what Joe says. He's going to be trotting out all of the lines that you normally would hear at his off-the-rails rallies. And that's what you're going to see, because Trump knows that that's the guy that his base voted for. So he wants his base to see that guy every time. And so I think what you're going to see from Trump is about as off script as it has ever been in a presidential debate. And there is going to be name calling, and there's going to be all of the lies. And he's going to, recently he even said that, well, with regard to the COVID-19 thing, it really hasn't affected anybody, really. Remember, that was just a few days ago. He said it virtually affected nobody. So you're going to hear all of this stuff. He's going to treat the debate like a rally. And there's going to be a lot of name calling about whether it's Joe or Kamala Harris. I predict he's going to intentionally mispronounce Kamala Harris's name a lot. He's going to question her birthplace the same way he did Obama. And you're going to hear all of that in the debates. The debate, from Trump's point of view, is another rally.
Yeah, I agree. His town hall shows that he really doesn't have the discipline to do it. Of course, they're blaming it on Stephanopoulos having, not Stephan. Yeah, I think it was Stephanopoulos who was the host, ambushing him. But those weren't tough questions at all. He should have handled it better. And Biden did his and looked like a statesman, and that's his goal. Look like a statesman. That's how he wants to present. If you want to his theme has to be, if you want to return national government to the grown-ups, this is your opportunity. That's got to be his theme. He himself has said, I just have to not take the debate, not get angry at what Trump is saying, not respond with anger, but just focus and stick with the issues. And it's going to be Chris Wallace, I believe.
The first debate is Chris Wallace by himself. Yeah, and he's already listed the topics he wants to cover, and it's mostly what you would guess. It's everything from the pandemic to the court. So.
And Chris Wallace is actually somebody on Fox that I respect, and actually I watch his stuff. I don't, his politics are conservative for mine, but he is just as hard on Republicans on his show as he is on Democrats. And I actually think Biden should go on his show. Yeah, he'll get tough questions, but he needs to show he can handle them. Bernie did that. He went right onto a Fox town hall, and I think that would be good. I don't think there's a whole lot of risk there. I think so. He really, but Biden really needs to stay focused and be a statesman. And I think if he does that, he's going to further expand his lead.
Yeah, well, the one good thing for Biden with this first debate being hosted by Fox is that Biden, because of all of his years in Washington, including as vice president, he has a lot of experience in dealing with Chris Wallace. So. This is a known commodity, and probably as comfortable as it could be in a Fox situation for Joe Biden, because he's known Chris Wallace, even Chris Wallace's dad. So Biden has a lot of experience handling the questions from Chris Wallace, in contrast to some of the other folks on Fox who would just be doing Donald Trump's bidding, and that would be a dangerous situation for Biden. So I think it's set up well for Biden. And I think he has to show as much contrast as far as statesmanship goes, because Trump is going to be off the rails.
All right, why don't we talk about the election again, assuming that the election means anything. What do you think? What state do you think is the tipping state?
Well, I think there are a number of them, and surprise, surprise, it could be Texas. It's within 1 point in Texas. Yes. I'm a little worried now about Florida. I had been thinking Biden was going to win Florida. I've been concerned about that over the last week or so. Things have changed, seemingly have changed there a little bit. At the same time, they've moved a little closer to Biden in Texas. Now, if he does not get Texas, I think he's going to get North Carolina. I know that they have suppression problems there. I think Biden is going to win North Carolina, and that's going to be maybe one of the tipping points for him. I think he's also going to get Arizona, because I think Cindy McCain's endorsement, and look, endorsements don't always mean a lot in normal times. We are not in normal times. I think in the times in which we find ourselves, and in the state of Arizona, given who she is, Cindy McCain's public endorsement might mean something. So I think, to answer your question, it's going to be North Carolina and Arizona combined. What do you think?
I think Pennsylvania. I think the team who wins Pennsylvania wins the race.
Yeah.
I think it's a bellwether state. It's about where maybe slightly to the right of the rest of the country, but so far Biden has advantages in the polls. He's got a little bit of a home turf thing there. He's got the Philadelphia suburbs, particularly the women that were kind of soft for Clinton 4 years ago, are really strong for him. I think that's where he's got to focus. Wisconsin too, but he seems to be ahead in Wisconsin. And really, you look at all the states, the only two chances that Trump has, three chances that Trump has of flipping any states in his favor are Nevada, New Hampshire, and Minnesota. And I really don't think he's got a chance. Even though there have been some polls that had him close, I don't think he's going to carry those states. And I don't think he does either. He's all but pulled out of Michigan.
Yeah.
And so he's going to fight in Pennsylvania and Washington and try to hold everything else, including North Carolina. But you're right about Texas. The RNC just wired $1.3 million to Texas. They're concerned.
Well, that's unprecedented too. Generally, fundraising in Texas on the right is never a problem. But with the amount of money that Biden has raised and the amount of money they're able to spend in Texas now, the RNC had to prop up what's going on in Texas by injecting over $1 million in there. And as far as I know, that's not been done before. So that's a sign that Texas may be in play. Also, one last thing on Texas, John Cornyn is now in trouble in Texas in his reelection bid. Now, who knows? But things are happening in Texas. And the states you listed that Trump might get, I'm not sure that's enough. I'm not sure that those three are enough, because those are not huge states. And
no, they're not.
There are some big states like Texas and Florida that are vulnerable.
I want to say one thing quick on Florida. Bloomberg's about to drop $100 million in there.
Yes.
And part of the money he used is paying off the fines of the poll tax for 32,000 felons who weren't going to be allowed to vote unless they came up with the money to pay the fines. And then the Supreme Court, one of the people being considered for the Supreme Court, ruled, with the conservatives minority on that in Florida, but it got overturned at the Supreme Court already. And so Florida was going to be able to bar most of those 32,000, and Bloomberg just wrote a check, said, "Here you go vote." And who do you think those people are gonna lean towards voting at this point, even if they weren't before?
Right. Yeah, those are votes for Biden. Yeah, for sure.
So we'll see. We'll see what the ad does. All right. We are at the top of the hour, or at the closing of the show, and it is time for predictions. I am going to make my Senate predictions here.
Okay.
I predict that the Democrats win in Arizona, in Colorado, North Carolina, and Maine. That's 4 pickups. I am also going to predict that I really think there's a good chance that Graham gets ousted because although other Republicans have hypocrisy, the hypocrisy is profound with him. He said, use those words against me. And I do think that some Republicans, principled Republicans, are going to turn on the Republican Party for backing out of that. I think people are not that dumb. I do think people's words mean something. And I think it's going to be close in Montana with Daines. Don't know if Bullock has quite enough to pull it off, but we'll see. And I think it's going to be a lot closer than it was going to be with McConnell. And I think Joni Ernst is going to lose as well.
Yeah.
So that's my prediction for the Democrats. I think that this is going to be the Ruth Gator Ginsburg impact. But I know a lot of people disagree with me on that.
Yeah. Two predictions, just to follow up on one of yours. I think that Biden will win Iowa. I hope Joni Ernst is defeated, but I think Biden's going to win Iowa. The second thing is I'm at the point now where I'm predicting that the Democrats will get at least one of the 2 Senate seats from Georgia. I think there's one that looks pretty good, and there's another one that you can see a pathway there. So I'm saying Biden wins Iowa, and the Democrats get one of the Senate seats from Georgia. So we'll see.
All right. Well, all right. That's all we have for this week. I am going to read this because I've messed it up every time. So that's all the time we have for this week. Listen to Redwood Wonk on KCZH-LP 96.7 every week at the same time. Watch us on Access Humboldt Channel 12, which I believe is 7:30 on Tuesday night and 7:30 on Thursday night. So you'll actually be seeing it during the debate on Tuesday night if you're watching. But until next time, we'll see you on Redwood Wonk. I want to thank Matt and thank you, Chuck.
Yep.